Free and fair elections are the most important part of a participative democracy. That makes electoral funding an immensely important subject. Today, I want to talk to you about electoral bonds, which in only 3 years of their inception have become the number one source of funding for political parties. National parties derive more than 52% of their income from electoral bonds, and regional parties get close to 54% of their income through electoral bonds. I am making this video to give you a brief understanding about electoral bonds, their induction into our political system, and the accompanying amendments that came along with it, the objections raised against it by organizations and NGOs, and the battles that are being fought in the Supreme Court right now. An electoral bond is an instrument that is in the form of a promissory note. It's called a bearer instrument. It does not contain any names of the payer or the payee. The number one bearer instrument that we are all aware of: currency. These bonds could be purchased from select SBI branches around India. They are sold 4 times in a year: January, April, July, and October, for 10 days. They are available in denominations of 1,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakh, and 1 crore. Any individual or organization with a KYC compliant account can purchase these bonds at the SBI branch. They can then go present these bonds to any political party of their choice. The only condition is that the party should be a nationally registered party and should have won at least 1% of the vote in the previous elections that they had contested. The party then has to encash those bonds within 15 days of the date of sale. Arun Jaitley in the 2017 budget announced these electoral bonds and brought them in through the Finance Act of 2017. They got ratified on Jan 2nd, 2018. From 2018 to now, total of 12,000 plus electoral bonds have been sold for an amount of 6,500 crores. 92% of the bonds sold by value have been of 1 crore. So it is not individuals who are contributing these amounts, it is mainly corporate donors. There were accompanying amendments made in 4 acts to accommodate these bonds: ROPA, or the Representation of Peoples Act 1951, Income Tax Act of 1961, Companies Act of 2013, and the Reserve Bank of India Act of 1934. Let me give a brief understanding of what were the amendments brought out in these 4 acts to facilitate these bonds. Representation of Peoples Act. Earlier, this act specified that any donation made above 20,000 rupees had to be disclosed by the political party along with the name, address, and PAN details of the donor. This was amended to exempt electoral bonds from any such disclosure. Changes in the Income Tax Act. All donations that were made to political parties was tax exempt as long as the party declared the details of people donating over 20,000 rupees. This was amended to even include electoral bonds under the tax exemption. It also changed the limit on cash to 2,000 rupees from 20,000 rupees. Changes in the Company Act. In the Companies Act, there was a requirement that only companies that have been profitable for 3 years or more can donate towards political parties. Also, a company could donate only 7.5% of its net profits in a year towards a political party. This was amended to remove electoral bonds. Now, any company that donates in the form of electoral bonds does not need to disclose which party they have donated to. Whereas earlier, it was mandated that all companies had to disclose in their financial statements the amounts that they had donated and also the specifics of which party they were donating to. Changes in the RBI Act. The RBI Act mandated that the Reserve Bank of India was the only authority that could issue bearer instruments. Now, this was amended to ensure that the government too can bring out bearer instruments in the form of electoral bonds and sell it through designated banks. So in effect, the government not only empowered itself to create these bearer instruments called electoral bonds, but they also enabled any company created at any time to donate any amount to a political party with absolute secrecy, and such donations would enjoy complete tax exemption. There has been substantial opposition to these electoral bonds from the RBI and from the Election Commission. The RBI had written multiple letters to the ministry stating that these bonds are a bad idea. Urjit Patel, the previous RBI governor, had written a letter to the Finance Ministry stating that this would lead to slush funds coming into our electoral process. He also said that this would create a parallel currency and that would undermine the authority of the RBI. They had warned the government about the possibility of money laundering through these opaque electoral bonds. The Election Commission too had sent multiple letters to the ministry regarding these electoral bonds and dissuading them from their introduction. The Election Commission said that this is a move away from transparency and is against the electoral reforms that have been going on in our country for decades. They have pointed out that the flaws and secrecy that shrouds these electoral bonds could lead to quid pro quo arrangements between companies and political parties and would lead to more crony capitalism. Former Chief Election Commissioners S.Y. Qureshi and O.P. Rawat had come out publicly with their misgivings about this electoral bond scheme. The concerns of both these organizations were either dismissed or rejected, and the government went ahead and ratified this bond scheme. They introduced this scheme as a money bill. A money bill does not need to pass through the Rajya Sabha and can be passed only by the Lok Sabha. To note here is, in 2017, BJP did not have a majority in the Rajya Sabha. So they used the money bill route to bypass Rajya Sabha and to bring this into law. These electoral bonds, while reducing the transparency in our electoral system, also have underlying constitutional issues. It is on the basis of these constitutional issues that NGOs like Common Cause and ADR, which is the Association for Democratic Reforms, have filed PILs against this in the Supreme Court. There are three main constitutional issues in these electoral bonds. Constitutional issue 1, the right to know. In a number of previous judgments, the Supreme Court had upheld that the freedom of expression that is enshrined in Article 19 also includes a right to know. The average citizen has a right to know about the activities of political parties, the criminal background of netas, and other such factors which would affect their decision and judgment in exercising their vote. The electoral bond scheme, by making the bonds anonymous and by removing any disclosure requirements, deprives the citizen of this important information and violates his right to know. The second constitutional issue is manifest arbitrariness. Any law which is manifestly arbitrary is against the Article 14 of the Indian Constitution. When I say manifestly arbitrary, what I mean is, if the law is stated for a particular purpose, but the actions carried out after that do not align with that purpose, then that law is called to be manifestly arbitrary. The electoral bonds were brought in with the stated intention of cleaning up the electoral system and introducing greater transparency in our electoral process, whereas the accompanying amendments have only served to increase the opacity and completely reduce the transparency that was available before. It cloaks the donors and the funding sources in secrecy, so this is manifestly arbitrary. The third constitutional issue is the money bill route. Money bills are laws which contain provisions dealing with taxes or with regulation of government spending. But the amendments made in this scheme do not fall under the constitutional ambit of a money bill. According to the PILs filed by Common Cause and ADR, the amendments, when read together, show that the electoral bonds are designed to keep details away from auditors, from the income tax authorities, from the government, from regulatory authorities, and from the general public. All these petitions also mention all the objections that have been raised by the Election Commission and RBI against these electoral bonds. We now have to wait and see what the Supreme Court thinks. I'm making these short videos because I feel that we need to know about these developments in our country and we need to be aware when we are exercising our right to vote. Let's all know what's happening in our system and let's all be the informed, intelligent citizenry that can take this country forward. I'll see you next time.